Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you with a title that may raise eyebrows, ignite curiosity, and perhaps even trigger judgment. I am a spiritual playboy. But let me assure you, this is not a contradiction. It's a bold statement about freedom, joy, exploration, and awakening of both the soul and the senses. To be a spiritual playboy is to dance with life, not run from it. It's to love deeply, laugh fully, and live authentically. It's not about shallow indulgence, but about intentional pleasure, emotional awareness, and elevated connection. It's where the sacred and the sensual meet, where depth doesn't fear delight. The term spiritual playboy may appear paradoxical at first glance. Two seemingly opposite worlds colliding. On one side, we imagine the playboy archetype, indulgent, carefree, romantic, and often associated with a materialistic lifestyle. On the other, spirituality invokes images of monks, ascetics, renunciates, or seekers who abandon worldly pleasures in pursuit of higher truths. To put these two together is to challenge centuries of conditioning about what it means to be spiritual, to expose the limitations in how we define both play and divinity. This key point encourages us to dismantle rigid definitions and reconstruct a more inclusive, liberated understanding of spiritual identity. To redefine the concept means recognizing that the human experience is multidimensional. We are not just spirits in stillness. We are spirits in motion, in celebration, in desire, in experimentation. The idea that someone who embraces joy, romance, and sensuality cannot also be spiritually grounded is outdated. It confines spiritually to exist in every moment, whether on a dance floor, during a shared gaze, or even in spontaneous laughter. When we redefine, we allow spirituality to breathe and expand beyond dogma and to find new expressions through the vibrancy of life itself. The modern individual is no longer confined to binary identities. One can be both grounded and playful, both disciplined and wild, both introspective and expressive. The spiritual playboy does not seek meaning by rejecting pleasure, but by discovering it within it. He sees beauty not as vanity, but as a divine whisper. He understands that seduction, when guided by respect and depth, is not manipulation, but magnetism. This isn't about being frivolous. It's about being fully alive and awake to every layer of human potential. Redefinition means that we stop choosing between extremes and instead embrace complexity as a pathway to inner truth. At its core, redefining the concept means challenging the cultural narratives that label joy as superficial and sensuality as sinful. Historically, many traditions have painted spirituality as something earned through sacrifice and suffering, often vilifying the body and the senses. The spiritual playboy says, I reclaim my right to be both sacred and sensual. He does not see his desires as distractions, but as opportunities for self-discovery. The body becomes a temple, not a prison. Through this lens, play and impre In, 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 in. In redefining the concept, we open doors for a more inclusive spiritual path, one that welcomes dancers, artists, lovers, and rebels. It reminds us that spirituality is not a uniform, but a fingerprint unique to each soul. The spiritual playboy is a symbol of someone who defies expectation and chooses to explore the divine on his own terms. His spiritual path may be paved with poetry and perfume rather than mantras and incense, but the depth of his seeking is no less real. By reframing what these words mean, we invite more people to embrace the sacred within themselves without fear of judgment or the need to conform. For far too long, spirituality has been associated solely with stillness, austerity, and often suffering. While these paths certainly have merit, they are not the only roads to inner awakening. Joy, often dismissed as fleeting or shallow, is in fact one of the most profound experiences a human being can have. When one feels true joy, not the kind born of distraction or indulgence, but the kind that arises from deep presence and alignment, it becomes a gateway into something eternal. Joy lifts the spirit beyond the ordinary and reveals a state of being where everything feels interconnected, meaningful, and vibrant. In the life of a spiritual playboy, joy is not just an emotion, it is a form of worship. To laugh deeply, to experience blissful connection, to move through life with a sense of celebration. These are not signs of spiritual immaturity, but evidence of spiritual richness. The ability to find joy even in the chaos of modern life is a sign of someone who is awake, aware, and rooted in gratitude. It means that one does not wait for perfection to arrive before choosing to celebrate. One celebrates as a form of choosing the moment fully. Joy becomes a spiritual tool, not an escape from life, but a deep immersion into it. Joy also creates the emotional spaciousness necessary for transformation. When we are joyful, we are more open to change, more capable of compassion, and more willing to surrender our defenses. It is difficult to be rigid and joyful at the same time. Joy softens us, makes us curious, playful, and trusting. These qualities are essential for spiritual awakening, which often requires us to dismantle old patterns, question deeply held beliefs, and embrace uncertainty. A joyful heart meets these challenges not with fear, but with wonder. In this way, joy becomes not a distraction from the spiritual journey, but a fuel that sustains it. Moreover, joy can be a powerful mirror of the soul's alignment. When we are doing work, building relationships, or living in a way that brings us joy, it often means we are walking a path aligned with our inner truth. Conversely, when our lives are filled with tension, dullness, and chronic dissatisfaction, it may indicate that we are out of sync with our spiritual calling. The spiritual playboy listens to his joy as a compass. He does not pursue joy blindly, but attentively, tracking what kind of joy nourishes and what kind of joy depletes. This discernment turns joy from a fleeting emotion into a reliable spiritual guide. In embracing joy as a spiritual path, one rejects the outdated notion that seriousness equals depth. While reflection, solitude, and inner work are essential, they do not require the absence of laughter, pleasure, or spontaneity. In fact, joy often brings us closer to others, breaks down barriers, and allows us to experience the divine through connection. The spiritual playboy understands this. He doesn't compartmentalize joy from growth. He fuses them, whether through music, touch, beauty, or movement. He channels joy into his awakening, not away from it. And in doing so, he transforms his entire life into a sacred celebration. In many traditional narratives, pleasure is viewed with suspicion. It is often seen as a temptation, a distraction, or a weakness that must be controlled or even renounced. It's not about indulging without limit, but about honoring the body and senses as vessels for divine experience. Awareness turns pleasure into mindfulness. It transforms the act from instinct to intention. Experiencing pleasure with awareness means fully inhabiting the moment, whether it's the taste of ripe fruit, the softness of silk on skin, or the ecstasy of intimate connection. The spiritual playboy is present for it all, not lost in desire, but immersed in appreciation. There is no rush, no guilt, no numbness. Instead, there is attention, reverence, and gratitude. This conscious relationship with pleasure cultivates a sense of wholeness. The mind does not reject the body, and the soul does not bypass the senses. Everything is aligned. This alignment is what separates awakened pleasure from unconscious. Pleasure without awareness often leads to emptiness. It becomes a chase, a loop of seeking without ever feeling satisfied. The spiritual playboy knows this cycle well, and he has risen above it. He no longer seeks pleasure to fill a void. Instead, he allows pleasure to reveal what is already whole within him. Each pleasurable moment is not an escape, but a return to the self, the now, the pulse of being alive. He asks not, how much more can I get? But rather, how deeply can I feel this? That question transforms the very nature of pleasure from surface level gratification to soulful. What's revolutionary about this approach is that it reclaims pleasure as a spiritual practice. Just as one might use breath or mantra to focus the mind, the spiritual playboy uses the pleasure of being alive as a form of meditation. He becomes more attuned to his body, more sensitive to energy, more grounded in sensation. This refined awareness heightens perception, not just of physical pleasure, but of emotional nuance, intuitive insight, and spiritual presence. Pleasure becomes a teacher, revealing what brings harmony and what creates dissonance. In this way, awareness shapes pleasure into a path of growth, not regression. The beauty of pleasure with awareness lies in its honesty. There's no pretending to be above desire, no shame in wanting to feel good, no conflict between enjoying life and being spiritually evolved. Through this lens, life becomes a tapestry of experiences that all have meaning, each touch, taste, and emotion contributing to a larger sacred story. In this story, pleasure is not a sin to resist, but a truth to be honored. Relationships are often perceived as external engagements, encounters with others that either bring joy, pain, comfort, or challenge. But the spiritual playboy sees them differently. To him, every relationship is a mirror, a reflection of the inner world, projected outward. Whether romantic, platonic, fleeting, or long-lasting, each connection holds up a spiritual mirror that reveals hidden beliefs, patterns, wounds, and desires. The people he attracts, feels drawn to, or even struggles with are not random. They are manifestations of his subconscious. By viewing relationships as mirrors, he gains the rare ability to use connection as a tool for self-psycholization. In intimate relationships especially, the mirror effect becomes intense. The concept of creativity. The shared humanity is inhibited in discomfort. Instead, embracing the fear. He understands that every trigger is an invitation, every argument a reflection of something unresolved, and every moment of deep connection an opportunity for transcendence. Rather than blaming others for his emotional responses, he turns inward and asks, "What is this teaching me about myself?" This mirror dynamic transforms even heartbreak into something sacred. The ending of a relationship, while painful, becomes an initiation, a portal into deeper emotional maturity and spiritual strength. The spiritual playboy does not view a breakup as a failure, but as a completed lesson. He studies his part in the dynamic, his expectations, his attachments, and his emotional habits. In doing so, he uncovers patterns that may have gone unnoticed in solitude. Through heartbreak, he learns compassion for himself and others, and he refines his ability to love without clinging. Relationships thus become spiritual accelerators, pushing him forward on his path. Moreover, seeing relationships as mirrors dissolves the illusion of separation. The spiritual playboy recognizes that the way he treats others, judges them, or reacts to them is inseparable from how he feels about himself. If he is critical of another's expression, he looks for what within him still fears expression. If he is enchanted by another's passion, he explores where he has stifled his own. Every attraction and repulsion is meaningful. This level of self-inquiry requires courage, but it leads to a level of awareness that transforms relationships from casual encounters to sacred reflections of the soul's evolution. When relationships are approached with this depth, they stop being about possession, validation, or control. They become arenas of spiritual practice, where communication becomes a meditation, intimacy becomes a prayer, and conflict becomes alchemy. The spiritual playboy does not seek to fix others, nor does he expect others to complete him. He enters relationships not out of need, but out of curiosity and presence. In this way, love becomes a journey not just with another person, but back to the self. Through others, he meets himself again and again in more honest, expansive, and revealing ways. For centuries, renunciation has been portrayed as the pinnacle of spiritual achievement, leaving behind the material world, surrendering the senses, and rejecting desires in the pursuit of inner peace. But the spiritual playboy offers a counter-narrative. He chooses integration over renunciation. Rather than turning away from the world, he chooses to walk through it, fully awake, fully engaged, and fully conscious. He believes that true spiritual growth doesn't require withdrawal from life's richness, but a deeper embrace of it. Integration means learning how to be in the world, but not lost in it. To feel desire without being ruled by it. To integrate rather than renounce is to honor all aspects of one's humanity. The spiritual playboy understands that he was not given a body, emotions, and senses by mistake. They are not obstacles, but instruments. Every feeling, from lust to loneliness, from excitement to grief, holds sacred information. He does not shun the body in favor of the soul. Instead, he aligns them, understanding that the divine speaks just as clearly through sensation as it does through silence. Integration is the recognition that wholeness is not achieved through division. The challenge with renunciation is that it often creates fragmentation. One part of the self strives for purity while another part is repressed, denied, or hidden in shame. But what is repressed never disappears. It only festers in the shadow, often returning in toxic forms. The spiritual playboy, however, brings his shadow into the light. He invites all parts of himself to the table. His sensuality, his ambition, his fears, his dreams. He holds space for contradiction, knowing that spiritual evolution isn't about perfection, but honesty. Through integration, he creates an inner ecosystem where nothing is exiled and everything has its place. This path also offers greater sustainability. Renunciation may lead to temporary peace, but often it is brittle, easily disturbed when temptation or the world knocks at the door. Integration, by contrast, builds resilience. The spiritual playboy learns to navigate chaos without losing his center. He doesn't need to escape the world to feel spiritual. He finds the sacred in the city, in relationships, in pleasure, and even in mistake. His spirituality is not something he puts on and takes off like a robe. It's woven into the very fabric of his daily life. He learns how to stay grounded even while flying high. Ultimately, integration allows for the creation of a life that is both meaningful and vibrant. The spiritual playboy does not choose between transcendence and enjoyment. He chooses both. He meditates and he dances. He contemplates and he kisses. He fasts and he feasts. In his world, there are no false dichotomies, only a deep desire to be whole. Integration is not a compromise. It is a liberation from extreme. It is the refusal to be split between sacred and profane. spiritual and sensual. It is the brave act of saying, I will live all of me and find God in every corner of my existence. The spiritual playboy is not a monk in the mountains, nor is he hidden in a forest or behind monastery walls. He walks through the streets of the modern world, among neon lights, smartphones, fast-moving conversations, crowded cafes, and weekend flights. His journey is not about leaving the world behind, but awakening within it. He sees the modern landscape not as a spiritual obstacle, but as a dynamic spiritual playground. For him, spirituality is not bound by time, geography, or tradition. It's a living, breathing force that adapts and evolves. He understands that sacredness does not diminish in a city. It transforms. The divine is present in traffic, in noise, in nightclubs, and even in the algorithmic scroll of a digital screen. In the fast-paced environment of contemporary life, distractions are everywhere. Many believe that true spirituality demands isolation and silence. But the spiritual playboy flips that assumption on its head. He cultivates presence in the midst of chaos. He knows how to breathe deeply in a crowded room, how to observe without reacting in a heated debate, how to meditate in the middle of a noisy party. He trains himself to be centered not by escaping stimulation, but by mastering his inner stillness amidst it. This is a powerful kind of spirituality, one forged not in retreat, but in engagement. One that doesn't ask him to run, but to rise. In the modern world, we are constantly connected, yet increasingly disconnected from ourselves. The spiritual playboy recognizes this paradox and becomes a conscious participant in technology and culture without being consumed by them. He uses social media to inspire, not to compare. He builds relationships with intention, not just convenience. His spirituality is not performative. It's integrated into his lifestyle. He can enjoy modern luxuries while still being rooted in timeless values. His phone may be full of messages, but his heart is full of mindfulness. This is not a contradiction. It's a mastery of balance in a digitized age. Importantly, the spiritual playboy refuses to compartmentalize his spirituality. He doesn't wear it like a costume in yoga class and discard it at a rooftop party. His authenticity is constant, whether he's at a retreat or a rooftop bar, on a dating app or in deep meditation. The settings change, but the presence remains. This is what makes his spirituality real. It's not a persona, it's a vibration that follows him everywhere. It's found in the way he listens, the way he touches, the way he celebrates. Every environment becomes an opportunity to practice, to ground, and to expand. This perspective reflects a crucial evolution in how we define spirituality in the 21st century. It's no longer about choosing between the ancient and the modern, the spiritual and the secular. The spiritual playboy blends them all. He embodies the wisdom of old and the rhythm of now. He learns from tantra and technology, from sacred texts and street conversations. He does not fear the pace of progress. He flows with it, dancing between consciousness and culture. His presence becomes a bridge between worlds, between selves, between what is holy and what is human. To embrace wholeness is to reject the illusion that we must fragment ourselves to be worthy, enlightened, or accepted. The spiritual playboy understands that within every human being exists a vast spectrum of energies, light and shadow, love and fear, devotion and desire. He does not seek to become only one side of himself while burying the rest. Instead, he welcomes the full range of who he is with open arms. He recognizes that wholeness is not about purity or perfection. It's about inclusion. Every emotion, every impulse, every contradiction has its rightful place. In embracing wholeness, he claims his true power, not by cutting pieces away, but by gathering them into a conscious unity. Many spiritual paths ask individuals to transcend or purify the self, often creating a split between what is considered holy and what is deemed unholy. But the spiritual playboy challenges this binary. He knows that true divinity is not sterile. It is raw, wild, and beautifully imperfect. He doesn't silence his sensuality to appear spiritual, nor does he ignore his wounds to seem strong. Instead, he allows his humanity to be fully visible, knowing that transparency is the foundation of transformation. This wholeness doesn't make him weak, it makes him unshakable. When you're not hiding from yourself, you become free. This commitment to wholeness transforms the way he relates to others. Because he accepts all aspects of himself, he does not judge others for their messiness or contradictions. He sees people not as broken or flawed, but as complete beings in various stages of remembering their own fullness. He becomes a safe space for others to show up as they are, unfiltered, unedited, and unmasked. His wholeness breeds compassion because it is rooted in share. He knows the pain of fragmentation and the courage it takes to integrate. As a result, he walks in the world not as a teacher from a pedestal, but as a mirror of truth and acceptance. Wholeness also gives him depth. He is not someone who simply floats above life's hardships with spiritual cliches. He has felt pain, heartbreak, rage, and longing, and he has made space for them all. Rather than suppress or deny these experiences, he turns them into wisdom. He does not bypass suffering, he transforms it. Through this process, his joy becomes deeper, his love more grounded, his presence more magnetic. People are drawn to him not because he pretends to have no darkness, but because he knows how to carry it with grace. This authenticity makes his spirituality tangible, accessible, and profoundly real. Living in wholeness is not always easy, especially in a world that constantly encourages performance, division, and masks. But the spiritual playboy chooses it anyway. He peels off the layers of conditioning and embraces the messy, beautiful truth of who he is. He does not try to ascend out of his body or deny his earthly nature. He walks with both his divine spark. In doing so, he becomes a lighthouse for others who are tired of trying to be just one thing. His life becomes the proof that wholeness is not only possible, it is the most spiritual choice of all. And so I stand here not as a contradiction, but as a new expression of truth. A spiritual playboy who lives with intention, feels with depth, and awakens through joy. I do not separate the sacred from the sensual, nor do I deny any part of who I am. I dance in the tension between light and shadow, between silence and sound, between discipline and desire. I walk through the modern world not lost in it, but rooted in something ancient and eternal within me. To be a spiritual playboy is not to live recklessly. It is to be bold enough to ask life for everything and to be responsive. It is to be bold enough to ask life for everything and to be responsive. It is to be, this path is not about escaping life's chaos, but meeting it fully. It is about finding freedom in integration, power in pleasure, and wisdom in wholeness. It is not the way of avoidance, it is the way of presence. Through joy, through connection, through awareness, I choose to live wide open, soul ignited, heart untamed. So yes, I am a spiritual playboy, not because I reject tradition, but because I expand it. Not because I seek approval, but because I follow truth. And in a world that often asks us to shrink, to conform, to choose either the sacred or the sensual, I choose both. Thank you.